Okay, so I'm back talking about SpongeBob again, it seems. To be honest with you, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to handle something like this, where I made a video a year and a half ago talking about every single game of a specific series, when it's ultimately inevitable that said series could come back at any moment with more games later down the line, as is the case and reason for this video today. I mean, heck dude, I never thought I'd have to make any sort of follow-up to Backyard Sports, considering that franchise went to rest in 2015, yet somehow in 2024, the rights owners managed to find a way to bring it back and re-release it on Steam in the same way a lot of other humongous entertainment games got released on Switch and PS5 about a year after I made those videos talking about those franchises, so what are you gonna do? Long as money makes the world go round and nostalgia continues to sell, the good old corpos will find ways to revive dead IPs and sell them once again just to make another buck. But hey, in all fairness, I'm not only here to talk about SpongeBob games that have been released since the making of my original video. There are some other topics I want to cover here today as well, considering that I messed up. As many of you lovely viewers pointed out to me, SpongeBob Obstacle Odyssey 2 actually did get a physical CD-ROM release after all, so technically, I missed a game. Well, hey, that's what this addendum video is for. I wouldn't really call this a part 2 the way I would for something like the continuation of my inevitable Sonic the Hedgehog games retrospective that I'm going to continue working on. It's more of just a follow-up to the first one, talking about the things I missed, intentionally avoided but feel like talking about now, or once again, new games that have since been released. That said, I won't bore you with all the details, so I'll give you the short version of what's being covered in this video now. A couple online games developed by Big Fish Games. I will be acknowledging the Spongebob Edutainment Games in one bulk section, so yes, the Leapster and V-Flash games will be talked about now. I will briefly acknowledge the Spongebob plug-and-play devices, and then I want to talk about a few expansive DLCs released for certain games, followed by wrapping up with the Patrick Star game. Rather than bore you with all the details during this intro sequence though, I think I'd be better off just jumping into the video right away. I'm going to get started in the first section of the video with acknowledgements towards a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, just so I can acknowledge some of their existences because there's a lot of other things that really don't deserve their own section, and then we'll shift focus to the main event. If you're not interested in any of that miscellaneous stuff and just want to hear about the main games of discussion, feel free to skip straight to the Obstacle Odyssey section and you can pick up from there. Sound good? Okay, cool. Then let's review some more SpongeBob video games, shall we? Okay, so like I explained in that brief introductory section, I want to talk about a bunch of miscellaneous SpongeBob appearances in video games right off the bat, just to sort of get those out of the way and move past them since I don't have a whole lot to say, but would at least like to acknowledge their existence. Because honestly, if I don't, there's gonna be that one kid in the audience that goes, "You didn't talk about XYZ." To which I would rebut by saying it didn't fit into the criteria I laid out at the start of the video, but oh well, I figure at least with what I have here, I think some of you watching might be interested to know these things existed at all, so while I'm not going to be giving you in-depth reviews of any of this stuff, I would at least like to fill you in on some of these nifty one-off things that SpongeBob had as part of his overall video game history. Right away, I will say that I am still not going to be talking about any web Flash games, because if Clash of Triton was anything to go by, they're super basic, and running through about 100 of those things on the warp speed wouldn't make for a very interesting video if you ask me. I just don't have much to say on some basic, albeit nostalgic for many, Flash games. There just isn't enough substance there. Secondly, I'm saying the same rules apply to mobile games, because I don't feel like trying to dig up these ancient fossils that were delisted eons ago and try to emulate them, and I also think they mostly fall into the same category. I'm sorry if this disappoints some of you because you might like mobile games, but I'll be honest, those things don't have a lot to talk about with them. I'm not really a fan of their predatory practices with microtransactions either, and I find the vast majority of their gameplay loops to be surface level at best, so I typically avoid these things entirely as a result. I just don't think it's worth it. Also, as with my Sonic video, I'm not interested in talking about games that merely reference SpongeBob somewhere, such as the well-known pineapple scene in Halo 2, the subtle reference in the Hitman 2 aquarium, the boss fight in one of the Borderlands 3 DLC expansions, or the reference within one of the shops in the Crew Motorfest. Now, I love the Crew, and I would love any chance I get to talk about that series, but I know fans of those games are a completely separate audience from the majority of you watching, so I'll spare you the details on that. You'd probably be bored out of your mind. Shoutouts to the few of you that like the crew though, you guys are awesome. Also, I want to call attention to the fact that I am not going to be talking about games that only implemented cosmetic stuff, like costumes and textures and whatnot, because that's basically just a more forward version of the references I was just alluding to. Rather than subtly placing a small detail in the background of a game, these are excuses to put licensed items right in the consumer's face and charge them money for it, which is another practice I'm not a huge fan of. Fall Guys, for example, does this. Truthfully, I feel like with nearly every franchise that I'm ever going to possibly make a video about, this is inevitably going to become a running gag where I have to mention that the franchise had representation via costumes in Fall Guys, and then I'm not talking about it any more than that. Mostly because cosmetic items don't affect the actual gameplay of the game, and Fall Guys in itself is not a SpongeBob game. I don't count it as such. SpongeBob was also featured in mobile apps like Brawlhalla and Brawl Stars too, as playable characters, which does put them on a higher tier status than that of a cosmetic pack, I would argue, but I'm not talking about those either outside of this acknowledgement, since those are mobile apps and my rule on that overrides this. Along the lines of half playable characters and half cosmetic skins comes the limited time DLC that was released for Hot Wheels Unleashed back in 2022, which featured a ton of different playable vehicles that were inspired by the main cast of characters of SpongeBob. Of course, since this was a limited time release, nobody nowadays can access these normally, which means the only way you can really experience them is by tracking down a mod and modding the PC version of the game. Honestly though, while I completely understand how licensing works and that it's not a forever thing, the concept of limited time experiences within a video game is not something I've ever been keen on. I'd rather a game make something available forever, and I hate it when games do this, but again, that's what modding is for, I suppose. I don't know, really, this is just starting to sound like an excuse for me to hate on modern gaming. That's not the intent of this video, I'm just explaining why I'm not talking about certain things and why I have criticisms and blah blah blah. If I wanted to make a video essay about all my criticisms of the gaming industry, I would do that. Speaking of something that's inaccessible nowadays though, Little Big Planet 3 had a DLC pack available for a limited time until the licensing ran out for our little square dude, and now it's also completely lost to time. The SpongeBob pack, though, consisted of several new character costumes and levels with a mini-story about Plankton building some machines around Bikini Bottom with Krabby Patty knockoffs that are polluting the town. Gameplay-wise, though, it plays like Little Big Planet, so that's what you can really expect to get out of a pack like this. Okay, now let's switch gears to some musical stuff for a second, shall we? Rock Band 4. I never really got into the Rock Band games myself, considering I suck at rhythm games in general, but at the very least I know I can do the singing part, although trust me, you don't want to hear my cover Misery Business by Paramore. Anyways, Rock Band 4 features 6 musical tracks from SpongeBob that you can play, which consist of The Best Day Ever, Where's Gary? That's my cat. I Can't Keep My Eyes Off You, A Day Like This, Employee of the Month, and Ridin' the Hook. So you can play any of those songs in that game if you wish. Missed opportunity that there's no Goofy Goober rock in there, but whatever, I get it. There's kind of a third-party licensing thing with the instrumental or whatever. Also in the music department is Just Dance 2025, which features an original song by Groove Century. Can't really play it since I don't want to risk copyright or anything, but it has an Uptown Funk vibe to it if I had to give you a description of what it sounds like. It also features some original animation in there, which is cool, although nothing extraordinary, but worthy of note nonetheless. Now, I never thought I'd ever bring up Madden of all things in a video of mine, but likewise, SpongeBob was also featured in the 2021 edition of Madden NFL, in the form of cosmetic items again, mind you, but still, this was a collaboration that's both surprising and not at all surprising, considering that Nickelodeon and the NFL seem to have collaborated a lot following the passing of creator Steven Hillenburg. Hey, remember when Super Bowl 53 completely teased us with Sweet Victory and then bait and switched us into sicko mode instead? Yeah, bad times. While everyone and their grandmother wishes that they would have done Sweet Victory proper justice since it was briefly following Hillenburg's passing, rest in peace, the fact that Nickelodeon finally did it proper during the Super Bowl 58 halftime show is better late than never in my book, and I gotta admit, it was pretty surreal seeing VTuber SpongeBob and Patrick commentating over the Super Bowl of all things, but it definitely provided for an interesting viewing experience, I'm sure.
You guys know what state he played college in? No. Texas. Oh, who cares about? No, never mind.
What is this world coming to? While on the subject of other events featuring the Yellow Sponge, surprisingly, there was a collaboration between Nickelodeon and Nintendo in 2016 in the form of a SpongeBob-themed Splatfest. For those unaware, Splatfests are basically these exclusive online-only events where people can compete for their choice between two options on a chosen topic. Burgers versus pizza, marshmallows versus hot dogs, Pokemon Red versus Pokemon Blue. You know, all the most common rivalries that people take sides on, and like I said, SpongeBob had one of these in which the debate was a fan choice between SpongeBob and Patrick, which was your favorite character. And surprisingly, Patrick actually ended up winning that one, believe it or not, which is cool. Also, on the subject of events, there was also an event on Pop Tropica for the Camp Coral movie and show. And while I would consider this a web browser game, I've got a little hint of nostalgia for Pop Tropica, so I couldn't help but mention it since I used to love hopping on that website when I was a kid. I've also got one more to add here, and this one actually falls back into the same category as Little Big Planet 3 and Hot Wheels Unleashed, where most of this stuff is basically no longer accessible. And the reason why I'm tacking it on here now is because I originally intended to talk about this game in its own section, but then I've come to realize it's not available anymore since the licensing ran out, so I guess, yeah, Oh Baby Kart, a kart racing game in a similar vein to that of Mario Kart or Team Sonic Racing, was released in early access at the end of 2023 and featured SpongeBob characters as playable DLC alongside a racetrack set in Bikini Bottom. As of the making of this video, the characters are no longer accessible for play, meaning there's no way I could have gotten footage of myself playing as SpongeBob or Mr. Krabs, unfortunately, but at the very least, the racetrack is still present in the game at the time of this recording, so there is some facet of SpongeBob collaboration present here, but still. I really hate this sort of thing with time releases because there's probably so many people out there that are going to stumble upon this game later on in life and question, why the heck is a Bikini Bottom racetrack here? Because all other semblances of relation to the franchise have been wiped out of the game entirely. That's not to say they couldn't come back in the future, of course. Maybe Nick and Oh Baby Kart can work out some kind of renewal deal, but as it stands right now, most of SpongeBob has been scrubbed from the game completely. Same goes for Invader Zim Racers 2, which were also featured in the game for an even shorter amount of time than SpongeBob, no less. Yeah, not a fan of this sort of thing. Not a knock against Oh Baby Kart or anything. I get it's all legal stuff, but what are you gonna do? Hopefully someone out there has access to mod the game or something so these characters will one day be playable again, assuming it hasn't already been done in the time since I recorded this. So yeah, that should about do it for all of the SpongeBob related games, add-on packs, and events that I wanted to talk about. Everything else moving forward will be a lot more detailed than this, I promise. So lightning round over, let's get into it and move on to a few games that I've gotten a lot of requests to talk about. Alright, so I have a confession to make. Like I said in the first section of the video, I may have unintentionally left out a video game from my original SpongeBob video talking about every video game, that being SpongeBob in Obstacle Odyssey 2, which, in all fairness, when I was making the video, I could not for the life of me find any proof that would have suggested this game got a physical release outside of this box, but apparently people were adamant with me that this game did indeed receive one, so I apologize for missing it. I did some further digging and I managed to find some stuff, so it wasn't on purpose, but when you're one guy reviewing over 50 games in a franchise, I suppose it's entirely possible you're gonna miss an obscure title here and there when making gargantuan videos like this. Since then, however, I've decided that I would find a way to talk about it since it was technically missed in my first attempt, and this video is the perfect excuse to do that. But actually, before that, I want to talk about the first game because it only makes sense to start from the beginning and set up some context for the sequel title before jumping right in. So, SpongeBob's Obstacle Odyssey 1, developed by Big Fish Games and released online in 2004. Despite what some people seem to believe, this game did not receive a physical release as far as any of my research shows. It was released strictly digitally back in the day, which meant in order to play this, you would have had to go on to Nickelodeon's website for the Nick Arcade, where you could download and install it to play. The Nick Arcade has since been nearly erased from history though, and it's both a shame and frustrating because it makes researching these Nick Arcade games extremely difficult because there are hardly any sources I can find online depicting a lot of what was available while it was up and running. It also doesn't help that there's a Nickelodeon game show from 1992 of the same name, which appears to be prioritized in most search results over the online web games. But either way, I managed to find a copy of it to play, so I do have some footage to use while I talk about it, thankfully. That said, the gist of this game is that it's basically Super Monkey Ball without the ball physics. Essentially, you're thrown into 3 sets of 20 levels that all have a start and an end, and it's up to you to get through each obstacle course and meet Patrick on the other side in order to successfully beat the level by platforming your way across gaps, slopes, barriers, and traps that stand in your way. There's no story to go off of here, no objective really, it's just a basic arcade game essentially, where you win by beating all of the levels. If you fail and die too many times, your score ends where you died. The nice thing is that if you don't care about score, you can pick up where you died. Sort of, in the sense that you can choose levels 1, 5, 10, 15, and 20 to start from in any given run. It's nice. There's also 3 sets of levels in the themes of Bikini Bottom, Jellyfish Fields, and The Abyss, which all contain separate obstacle courses, music, and visual color schemes that add to the variety so that the whole game doesn't look and sound super repetitive by the end of it. You can also collect these bubbles throughout the stage. However, one thing that I kinda have a gripe about is that it's all or nothing. The collectibles are actually worth absolutely nothing to you unless you collect literally all of them in the stage. If you collect some and finish the level without getting them all, you get a bonus to your score worth 0 points. But if you do get them all, you get a bonus of 1,000 points, which is a pretty significant chunk of score if you care about that sort of thing. If you're only playing for completion though and not score, these are virtually meaningless to you. Overall, the controls feel good. I never really had any qualms with the depth perception or the camera, so honestly, I'd say it plays really well. You're only playing as SpongeBob the whole time though, with the sole exception being bonus stages where you actually get to control a few of the other characters and collect items associated to them for additional score. Same catch though, it's all or nothing. Each bonus stage also has a brief character animation which adds to the charm as well. Most of the models look fine, but Squidward though? Yeesh, that's not appealing in the slightest, gotta say. This game was actually, believe it or not, just a reskin of another Big Fish Games title called Best Friends, a super obscure game released in 2002 that is hard to find but still has some evidence of remaining on the internet. So that means we've seen this not once but twice where SpongeBob got a reskin of a pre-existing title. The other of course being Diner Dash. And yeah, that's really all she wrote with this one, but the Obstacle Odyssey series doesn't stop there. Yeah, this game was apparently popular enough to warrant getting a sequel made, this time with seemingly a higher budget and more care put into it in comparison to the first title. On paper, Obstacle Odyssey 2 does just about everything a sequel should, so that's good. The game actually has a subtitle this time around, Time Trouble, which as the name implies means this time there's a theme to the game about the characters traveling through time, and that's true because believe it or not, there's a plot for it as well. Honestly, the Super Monkey Ball parallels are even more accurate because Super Monkey Ball 2 did the exact same thing to the first game of that franchise that Obstacle Odyssey 2 is doing here. In this story, Plankton essentially springs a trap to whisk SpongeBob and friends away into a time portal, sending them to another period where they can't stop him from stealing the Krabby Patty secret formula. And so he sets out on enacting his evil plan now that the Krab and Sponge are out of the way. Of course, lo and behold, since this is a time travel plot, Plankton forgets to account for the fact that SpongeBob managed to snag a time travel device, which essentially means they can warp right back to the moment they were sent away after he collects the rest of his friends in their stranded time periods, which he does with ease, and then they stop Plankton once and for all. A simple story, to be sure, but hey, it adds a bit more substance to the game and gives us a theme that, admittedly, outside of the menu and color aesthetics, doesn't really mean much when translating to the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, it's exactly the same as before in that there are a bunch of levels that SpongeBob can run around in to get from point A to point B, but this time Patrick isn't sitting at the end of the levels, instead it's just a time rift that SpongeBob can jump into to move on to the next stage. That's because, unlike the first game, Obstacle Odyssey 2 actually allows for 3 other playable characters, Patrick, Sandy, and Mr. Krabs. I guess they were so ashamed of Squidward's model that they completely omitted him from the sequel. Damn. But hey, we get 3 additional characters that SpongeBob can rescue at the end of each time period, resulting in them becoming playable after they are, of course, saved. Patrick is a slower character but doesn't get knocked around by obstacles easily. Sandy has a double jump, which makes her pretty broken in a lot of scenarios where she can just make it across the gaps the other characters would never have a chance of clearing, sort of implying that the game was actually designed only around SpongeBob for the most part, but that's not completely true as we can see in some levels at least. And Mr. Krabs is really, really fast, making him ideal for completing levels quick so you can score a massive time bonus. Yes, Just like the last game, this one also has a scoring system, but this time the time bonus and the collectible bonus are much more balanced out, to where it actually strikes me that in most levels, you're probably going to have to decide whether or not you want to score more points by rushing to the end in 10 seconds, or spending that extra time to collect 50 collectibles because of the sheer difference in point values. The time bonus is scored based on the number of seconds you have left, times 100, and the collectibles are the number you got, times 100, with an additional 1,000 point bonus if you collect them all. I actually think this is a great improvement overall because it feels far more balanced this way, to where you make the call on whether or not it's worth the points to get all the collectibles or just gun it straight to the end. It varies greatly by the number of collectibles and the length of the course. So, cool, giving the player some more agency, I dig it. There are bonus stages, but now that the playable characters are unlocked to be used in all levels, they aren't stuck to just those bonus stages, and it's actually a weird progression that this game has because you can essentially pick any of the 3 time periods at any given point. You've got the prehistoric era, the medieval era, and the future era, and you can jump all around to each one as you wish. I had actually thought that Patrick, Sandy, and Mr. Krabs were locked to those areas respectively, but as it turns out that's not the case. You unlock them in a linear order, the same order that I named them, regardless of which one you complete first. So it's honestly recommended you complete one era at a time rather than jumping back and forth, so you can unlock additional characters as soon as possible. Then, after you complete all 3, you unlock the bonus levels where you go back through and complete these as they're scattered through all 3 time periods, and then you beat the game and defeat Plankton. As I mentioned before, Obstacle Odyssey 2 actually eluded me on my first go around because I had thought the game was digital only. As it turns out, it actually did get a physical release, as I've stated before, but there is a catch to it. It was only available as part of a promotional gift box set featuring a SpongeBob lunchbox and a DVD copy of SpongeBob vs. the Big One, which even has written on the packaging that the game is not for sale separately, meaning Nickelodeon for some reason went out of their way to create a physical CD release of this game for the sole purpose of bundling it with a lunchbox. I have no idea why they did this, but they did. And so that explains why every single picture of this box art has the "for promotional use only" text written at the bottom of it. It technically did get a physical release, but only as part of a bundle. I don't know why they wouldn't want to sell it separately, but whatever. I'm not sure if anyone can shed some light on why this was never released as a standalone title and why Nickelodeon seemed to have such a tight grip on this game being bundle exclusive, but if anyone has any insight, please share in the comments below, because I'd love to know. Overall, Obstacle Odyssey 2 is better in just about every way. Better controls, better music, better characters, better stages, well, actually, except for the ones that are clearly recycled from the first game. Yeah, they couldn't sneak these past me. There are some pretty clear stages that were reused from the first title, and while that's not entirely a bad thing, I guess, it still became noticeable, although that's probably partially because I played these games back to back, so they were fresh in my memory. If I had a 2-year time gap in between releases, I probably would have forgotten about these layouts, and it wouldn't have even been flagged in my brain that they were reused. Either way though, Obstacle Odyssey 2 was a satisfying game to play, and I definitely enjoyed my time with it. Definitely recommend you try it if you can find a freeware copy of it floating around online.
Watch out for the stingers.
So that being said, let's go ahead and start with SpongeBob SquarePants Saves the Krusty Krab. This is an online game similar to that online movie tie-in title that I had talked about in my previous video when discussing all the different versions of the SpongeBob movie game. This game, like the others, was featured on Nick.com back in the early 2000s and was actually developed by 3D Groove, not Big Fish Games upon further research. But, you know, it's a 3D title I had easy access to. It's a bare-bones, basic 3D collectathon, kind of. In summary, in the game, you have to run around as SpongeBob, Patrick, or Squidward and collect these Krabby Patties scattered about. They're hidden in broad daylight though, so they aren't hard to find, and the game consists of 10 levels overall, in which the map stays exactly the same, so the only increases in difficulty are that the map borders move out a little bit, causing the area to expand, and the number of Krabby Patties you have to pick up increases by 3 every time. Your timer also increases though, so it really doesn't scale too much. It's also got a few power-ups such as a speed boost and bonus points which can add to your overall score, and this game used to have an online high score system, but given that it isn't hosted directly by Nickelodeon anymore, this thing doesn't function. The models look fine for an online 3D game from 2002, but the animations are stilted and the only background music is an ongoing loop of fun, so that starts to wear on the eardrums rather quick. And yeah, that's literally it for SpongeBob SquarePants Saves the Krusty Krab. Simple, really, is all it is. Anyhow, let's also move on to the next game, another Nick Arcade title, Krabby Quest. This game's actually a bit different from all the others because you aren't really moving around in a 3D environment in this one. Instead, it's actually a tile-based block-pushing puzzle game. So if you enjoy Pokemon Strength puzzles or Tales of dungeons with added flavor, fasten your seatbelts because you're in for a ride. Released in 2005, Krabby Quest is a fine enough puzzle game that isn't breaking any ground for the SpongeBob franchise and honestly doesn't impress me as much as something like Obstacle Odyssey did for the time. Basically, like I said, it's a puzzle game featuring SpongeBob and Patrick where you go around pushing blocks and collecting all the Krabby Patties in a level to proceed forward onto the next one. Along the way, there's colored switches that respond to pressure plates that said blocks can cover to activate pathways and bullies to avoid that basically want to beat you up. One criticism I do have of the game that isn't necessarily bad design, just annoying and tedious, is that if you get hit even once, the entire level resets. Very old school in its design, which at the time was a more common thing in all fairness, but it did make it a pain when you'd get 90% of the way through a level only to accidentally fall or screw up and thus have to start the level all over again. It's also possible to soft lock yourself into being unable to complete a level depending on how you push the blocks, and thus you're forced to restart the entire thing when that happens as well. Which is a core part of the game, I realize, but at the same time it ain't any fun, which is the real point I'm getting at here. You do unlock Patrick though after a few levels, and that leads to some creative puzzle solving when you attempt to beat some of the levels between the two, but I'll be honest though, I didn't bother completing this game to 100% because it really isn't all that captivating of a title, and having to reset levels multiple times over because of one mistake got very monotonous to the point that I wasn't having fun anymore. And hey, my philosophy is if I'm not having fun, I shouldn't be wasting my time on it. Even terrible games can be fun in their own way, but that's just it. This game isn't bad, just bland and tedious. So yeah, needless to say, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Hopefully these two titles are enough of an indication as to why most web-focused games don't really gel with me too much. I mean, sure, I have my favorites that I enjoyed from when I was younger, more so on the Cartoon Network side than Nickelodeon, but for the most part, these and mobile games aren't complex or intricate enough for me to get a lot of enjoyment out of. And that's okay. I get there's an audience for these kinds of games, and I'm glad other people can greatly enjoy them. They're just not for me, and I respectfully ask that people respect my opinion of that, just as I respect theirs. This video isn't 100% law on all SpongeBob games after all. My opinion is not the end-all be-all on this. But anyways, that's enough on Krabby Quest. Now, I'd like to shift gears over to the other category of games people were endlessly commenting to me about, despite the fact that I had stated I had no interest in covering them. The edutainment titles. Let's do it. So this section actually took a lot of research on my part because there's way more edutainment games out there than I initially expected there to be. Close to a dozen, in fact. So let's go ahead and burn through all of these really quick so I can provide some context on each one. If you were expecting 5 minutes of consistent detail on each of these games, well, I'm sorry to say you're not going to get that, mostly because I haven't actually played any of the games and I'm borrowing footage with credit to all of the people you'll be seeing pop up in the corner of the video with each game that passes, since I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't gonna go hunt down all of these games and systems and purchase them just for this video, try to figure out how to record some of them. It just isn't worth it. Sorry if that makes my reviews here seem less authentic since I'm only going off of the footage I've watched, but hey, at the very least, I'm being truthful and transparent with you guys instead of lying by pretending that I have played all of them and all that jazz. So yeah, now that I've prefaced that, let's dive in. First up, we have SpongeBob SquarePants Saves the Day, released in 2002 for the Leapfrog Leapster and later re-released for the Leapfrog LMAX in 2005 and the Leapster 2 in 2008. This game was developed in-house by Leapfrog's own team themselves and runs in a resolution of a lovely, wonderful 160p picture format, so we've got top-tier quality graphics here, guys. Anyways, sarcasm aside, the story of this game essentially follows a freezer called Below Zero falling off of a cargo ship and landing in Bikini Bottom, similar to Plankton's Robotic Revenge actually, and how that game starts off. But in this case, the Krusty Krab starts losing customers to it, and you know what? I'll let the intro cutscene speak for itself.
What's this? A new restaurant?
I'm ruined! All me customers are eating at Bistro Below Zero. What are we gonna do, SpongeBob?
Impress your friends, singe your eyebrows, create horrible smells in your kitchen. It's the Super Cellarific Kitchen Chemistry Set. Buy yours now.
Yep, that's the whole setup for the game, guys, so yeah. From there, we're brought to the menu screen where SpongeBob offers 5 different games to be played. Each one of these games has their own animated cutscenes leading into them, and each serve as a setup for SpongeBob to acquire another ingredient to add to the secret sauce that Mr. Krabs wants him to make, so that they can lure the Krusty Krab's customers back and get them away from the Below Zero competitor. One of the games, Musical Garden, allows the player to make music at a bunch of different musical stations that basically just add a bunch of instruments to a song when you click on them while SpongeBob dances alongside to it. It's a pretty decent section that essentially teaches kids about music and the different facets of it, such as instruments, pitch, and melody. Another game is Counting Claw, where SpongeBob basically counts change, an admittedly useful skill until currency becomes fully digital, that is, but pretty straight and to the point. Third comes Conveyor Chaos, which basically has Patrick jumping around conveyors and landing on ingredient combos that add up to the number on the screen at the bottom of the level. And then there's Bubble Scrubber, in which SpongeBob effectively uses jellyfish to spell words by blasting them with bubbles to get the proper suffixes that match the word being requested. After all 4 games have been played, the game ends with Kitchen Chemistry, where SpongeBob can craft his own secret sauce for the Krusty Krab to use to get the customers back. Overall, the game is exactly what you'd expect to get out of something like this. It teaches kids about music, counting money, basic addition and subtraction, and spelling. It's fine.
SpongeBob SquarePants, a day in the life of a sponge.
A Day in the Life of a Sponge is exactly what it sounds like, being the second game that advertises itself with the premise of getting to enact a day in the life of SpongeBob as he makes his way around Bikini Bottom on the V-Smile, a console made by a competitor to Leapfrog known as VTech, which had their own share of SpongeBob games released as well. Nice to see Nickelodeon didn't discriminate to just one platform and was willing to spread the love a little bit, so to speak. The game comes with 2 modes, Learning Adventure and Learning Zone. Learning Adventure, as the name implies, is the adventure mode that tells a story, if you can call it that, of SpongeBob going about his day. The mode starts off with Rise and Brine, where you need to blast all these icons except for the one named in the top left, followed by matching rhyming words to each other. Eventually, other events throughout SpongeBob's day take place, such as jellyfishing with Patrick, there's a Krusty Krab minigame, there's a minigame with Sandy that you can do, and all of these things basically add up to be some form of education, whether it be math or reading or what have you, to teach the kids that are playing the game. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I appreciate the adventure mode making an attempt to put some kind of cohesion in between all these random micro games, so, you know, that's nice, but as is the case with a lot of these edutainment titles, they serve their purpose, they just aren't impressive, you know? The second mode, as I mentioned, is the Learning Zone, which is where 4 additional games exist, being the Industrial Park, which is a shape collection game, Snapper Shots, which is identifying the differences between pictures. Third is Sonic Mania. No, wait, I mean Bargain Mania, sorry. Bargain Mania has SpongeBob collect groceries again, but this time it's weight-based instead of picture-based. And then lastly is the Jellyfish Fields game, where you catch jellyfish, but unlike the other jellyfishing game with Patrick, this one has you catching specific jellyfish to finish patterns accurately. You know, seeing all these games reminds me of stuff I used to do in elementary school, so like, yeah, I mean, I guess it is teaching the same sort of stuff I used to learn about, but that stuff was also like 20 years ago, so they're nothing but fading memories at this point. Overall though, I mean, the game is fine. I kinda liked the previous title for its semi-animated cutscenes compared to this one, but I think this title easily has the better games, no doubt. Thirdly comes Idea Sponge for the V-Flash, an upgrade from the V-Smile because as you can clearly see, this game processes 3D graphics, not 2D sprites. Kinda cool, right? Well, in this game, SpongeBob first helps the Krusty Krab get out of financial trouble by having SpongeBob go around doing different things, such as giving customers smoothies at Goo Lagoon before Plankton does, followed by a second game where SpongeBob and Patrick have to get the smoothie recipe back from Plankton, who stole it after seeing all the success that Krabs got at the beach instead of him, and this features a fully 3D shooter minigame in the third person, which is interesting, although it runs at an absolutely abhorrent frame rate. Completing this game then gets SpongeBob and Patrick trapped in the Chum Bucket's secret chamber, so the two need to unlock the room by changing the colors of these light bulbs and solve the passcode to unlock the door, which has a pretty chill song that plays in the background while you're solving it. Yeah, dude, I could get behind this music all day. This is some smooth sounding stuff. Once you get out, Plankton tries to escape with the recipe while SpongeBob overloads the grid with pressing the number of tiles on the ground so that every diagonal has a number of tiles pressed equal to the number in the bulbs. This puzzle is actually pretty cool. I really like this one because it takes some observation and thinking skills to solve, kind of like an easier Sudoku puzzle. Finishing the game causes Plankton to lose, SpongeBob gets the recipe back, and then the story ends. Yeah, this is a short one, only over after 4 levels, but hey, at least it doesn't overstay its welcome like Atlantis Square on the Wii does, so yeah. To compensate for the shorter adventure mode, the game comes with some knowledge world activities that teach kids about things such as bodies of water, ships, and life near the beach, as well as some creative workshop activities where you can redecorate the Krusty Krab like a home designer, basically choosing wallpaper, flooring, furniture, etc., and the party time minigame where you can pick the music, sound effects, and so on to create your own recorded version of a party, which you can then save to your memory card if you have one to be replayed at any time in the future. This stuff is fine enough, it's side material to the main course at the end of the day, but you know, it's nice that it's there at all, right? Well, actually, if you consider the total amount of time it takes to get through the knowledge world information, it's actually the longest mode and takes up more time than the standard Game Zone storyline does. So far these games really haven't changed my mind on the fact that they're just basic edutainment titles, but I'm already 3 games in, so hey, I may as well go the whole way, right? I mean, it can't get any worse.
Choose 1 or 2 players to get started. Choose this to learn how to play the game.
I spoke too soon. Here we have another Leapster game up, this one featuring SpongeBob and Patrick getting transported back in time, meaning Obstacle Odyssey 2 isn't the only time travel game in this video, believe it or not. In this game, the two characters look into a wormhole within an apple. Get it? Like a worm hole? Yeah, anyways. This sucks the two characters in and then they get started with the game's present here. We got a math game in the prehistoric area where you need to collect numbers greater than or less than a certain amount. The medieval times, which has you collecting shapes in the exact same conveyor gameplay, which, mind you, was used in that one Patrick game from the first Leapster title we talked about. I don't know about you guys, but this strikes me as a bit lazy, I'm not gonna lie. Because next they get transported to the future where SpongeBob then collects animals that are extinct using the exact same conveyor gameplay again. Ugh, you gotta be kidding me. I questioned if it could get any worse, and lo and behold, it got worse. Way to go, me! This game is easily the worst of the bunch so far. Whereas the previous titles all had diversity in their gameplay, this is just the same thing over and over again the entire time. I consider this game incredibly lazy, uninspired, and easily the most lackluster game of all the titles we have seen thus far. I mean, this one just fails to impress in pretty much any possible capacity. I don't really have anything nice to say about it. I mean, the bonus round is literally the same game again too, but set in a disco environment. Again, the laziness is oozing out of this one. And who knows, I mean, maybe this game didn't have a budget or something, but still, that doesn't excuse the fact that this is such a bland, boring, short waste of time, even for children that are trying to learn. Fifth on the list is Fists of Foam, which interestingly enough is themed after the Karate Island episode from season 4 of the show. This game's interesting because it's actually a side-scrolling beat-em-up rather than your traditional edutainment title, or so it seems. Technically, after you beat a level, the game hits you with some math questions or whatever that you need to solve to progress, but you know, hey, kudos to this game for trying to make an actual video game out of this. I can respect that. It already places leagues above all the other games for this fact alone. I mean, SpongeBob has a genuine moveset with different punch and kick moves and can even call in Patrick for a special maneuver, which is cool too. There's boss fights against the karate opponents that Sandy fought in the same episode, and the math questions don't seem all that intrusive, so you can't really say it's the majority of the gameplay. Nah, you spend way more time playing the karate stuff than you do the math questions. Plus, the game is only like 40 minutes long, so it really doesn't overstay its welcome much at all. And following Fists of Foam comes A Busy Day in Bikini Bottom, a game that I'll admit I found only one single video of that contains a minute of footage, so I can't really provide much detail on this one. This game was released for the VTech InnoTab, yet another obscure handheld learning device that probably sits in garbage dumps or old cardboard storage boxes collecting dust. Based on the footage, it looks like you're able to look up definitions of words, spell words, do basic math. Yeah, it's the same old, same old. It's just a slightly different version of the same game we've already seen before, but for what it's worth, I can tell there are references to post-season 3 SpongeBob as indicated by Plankton in the Patty Stealer's outfit. Yeah, given the obscurity of this game and lack of footage, I can't add more to it. And now we're all the way up to 2011 with this one. SpongeBob SquarePants Defending the Secret Formula is a game released for the VTech MobiGo. You would never guess this. But this game is yet another minigame collection consisting of a maze escape, a Krabby Patty Maker game, a game where you have to find Plankton who shrunk himself down to hide in SpongeBob's body, a spelling game that has the same layout as the previous game. Wait a minute. This is like the exact same game as the previous one, but a slightly different version from A Busy Day in Bikini Bottom. Did they like lazily release the same game with slight differences under different names or something? Well, probably, but it's hard for me to say considering I haven't played them. Oh well, that's my speculation at least. I don't know if this next one really counts as a game or not, but you know, I've already talked about all the other VTech games that I know of, so I may as well talk about this one quick. Model Sponge is a title released on the V-Reader in 2011 that, as the name implies, is meant to be more of an interactive storybook rather than an interactive gaming experience. Think back to like those interactive point-and-click storybook games from the 90s and 2000s. That's basically what this is here. I mean, you can look up the definitions of words used in the story, and supposedly there are reading-related games here, but this isn't anything like one of those minigame compilations. There's no math either. It's literally just reading a story, basically. Model Sponge is based on the Season 7 episode of the same name, in which SpongeBob thinks he's let go from working at the Krusty Krab and gets hired to be a commercial actor for a new model of Sponge that some company is selling. In the end, it's a whole misunderstanding, but from what I can tell, this title is pretty accurate to the episode, so honestly, if you want the experience, just watch the episode. Kinda makes me wonder what was so special about this, that this was the episode they made a V-Reader game out of? Was it randomly selected? Was it a favorite of a developer? Did Nickelodeon mandate it to be this episode? Who knows? And lastly, we have the Clam Prix. This one is a Mario Kart inspired racing game where you get to drive around the various courses and race against other Bikini Bottom characters while also spelling words and collecting letter bubbles that add slight educational spins to it. Not exactly the ideal way to experience a racing game if I'm being honest. I mean, it's cool, I guess, that by completing these words you unlock shortcuts and all that, but yeah, you're better off just playing a kart racer. Still, similar to Karate Island, I appreciate the attempt to make an actual video game out of this. It's far more game-like than a lot of the microgame compilations I've talked about, and surprisingly to me, this game was released in 2012, which was way beyond when I thought these leapfrog-like games went out of style. Then again, maybe that's just because I had grown out of these kinds of games after finishing elementary school, I don't know. Either way though, that's the gist of SpongeBob's edutainment video game catalog, at least from the games that I was able to find a coherent list of. It's very likely that there are even more SpongeBob edutainment games than the ones I found here, or in my previous video, such as SpongeBob Typing, so maybe those will resurface again one day. But for now, I'm ready to move on to something better. So what do we have next? Oh.
Where are all the customers?
They must have left while we were in the chum bucket.
What we need is a gimmick. Something to bring people in. I got it! Are you ready? Patty on a stick! The portable patty! Oh, it's brilliant! Oh, I know it'll work, Mr. Krabs. You'll see. Hello, Bikini Bottom. I'm ready!
Okay, so there's only a few of these plug-and-play games I can really cover in this section if I'm being honest with you, because half of the games I've found that exist, I can't find a trace of anywhere. There were supposedly some UK exclusive titles that I couldn't find hide nor hair of at all, so I'm just sticking to a couple of the ones that I was able to find some information for, which include the SpongeBob SquarePants Plug and Play, the Fry Cook Games, Bikini Bottom 500, Cash Dash, Delivery Service, Dilly Dabbler, and Jellyfish Dodge. If there's another plug and play title not listed here that you know of or grew up with, sorry, but I either couldn't find much information on it or flat out didn't know it existed. But that being said, I'ma just preface this by saying that every single one of these devices consists of a bunch of minigame compilations because that's all any of these could ever really amount to. I mean, I wouldn't typically expect this massive single player adventure or anything. Let's just start with the traditional plug and play and go from there. So, the original SpongeBob SquarePants Plug and Play device was released in 2003 and contains 5 different minigames on it. A Breakout minigame, yes, it's literally just Breakout, a sandy side-scrolling shooter game in a similar style to classic arcade space shooter games, a hook game where you need to stop the hooks from stealing SpongeBob's friends away and processing them into a can of tuna with a side of mayonnaise. Although, why they won't just step out of the way of the hooks is beyond me. There's Patrick's Maze game, which is sort of fun, kind of reminiscent of Krabby Quest, although this one is less puzzle-focused and more combat-focused, as Patrick has the ability to attack back for once. And lastly, there's a Donkey Kong clone, where you need to jump over obstacles and avoid hazards while you get to the top where Plankton sits. A pretty straightforward game. I'll be honest, I never found these sorts of plug-and-play games very fun or interesting as a kid who had a GameCube, because the lesser quality was so obviously apparent to me that it was just painful trying to play these sorts of games. I never even owned the SpongeBob ones in particular. I know for a fact I owned a plug-and-play game of something, and my sister owned a rhythm game Hannah Montana device. It's actually kind of weird to me that I can't remember what I owned, but I remember what my sister owned. But either way, while I do find some amount of charm in these titles nowadays, I definitely have no motive or reason to ever touch them outside of talking about them in a video like this, because really all that there is to carry them is nostalgia for them if you were someone who grew up with them. Going to them now as a fresh player, there's really no incentive to. Ultimately, I apologize if my short descriptions are not as fulfilling as one may like in this video, but honestly, it's hard for me to give in-depth reviews on these sorts of things for the same reason as the Edutainment Games. I mean, they just lack substance or appeal when it boils down to it, and there's nothing I can really do about that. They are classic arcade titles. Arcade games, nothing wrong with them, they're tons of fun, but they usually don't have a lot of depth. The gameplay loop is very basic, very straightforward, and very simple. It's easy to pick up and it just scales in difficulty as you go along, but most of these kinds of games are based around one singular concept, and that's the entire game. Sure, I could sit here and compare them to other titles, but I don't really feel the need to. Next comes the Fry Cook Games, which basically has a handful of minigames all themed around the, you guessed it, Fry Cook Games.
I declare these Fry Cook Games open!
There's a hurdles challenge, a catch the following ingredients to build Krabby Patties challenge, a skating challenge, and you get the idea. Basically, the core of this game is that there is a handful of minigames that you can complete in order in a similar vein to that of a decathlon in track and field, which is obviously what the Fry Cook Games take inspiration from, although more specifically the Olympics. Track and field is just a very big part of that, and I'm a fan of the sport, so you know, I care about these sorts of events because I ran some of them in high school. Anyways, yeah, basically, you complete these games, and then the environment changes. And then you complete these games again. And then the environment changes. And then you complete these games again. And then the environment changes. And you do this a bunch of repeated times until you eventually beat the game. That's about it. Next, there's Cash Dash, which was technically included as part of the Nicktoons plug and play amongst several other minigames. It's essentially a board game where you have to rush to some specifically assigned locations, get some cash, and make it back before everyone else. Lots of route optimization in this one needed for navigating around the board. So, you know, it's cool. It's a strategy-based game, definitely a lot more different from a lot of the other titles we've seen. Also, there's Delivery Service, which is a side-scrolling game where you jump and shoot your way to the end of the level. I really don't have much more to say about this one. Another TV game I'd like to talk about is Dilly Dabbler, which is less of a game compilation and more of an activity center similar to those one-stop fun shop games from Humongous Entertainment, or the more aptly named Pixar Activity Center PC games. You can draw in color, mix and match costumes, and build your own Krabby Patty in this one. There's some variety, and it's definitely meant more to cater to the kids that had more creative investments in these sort of things. These drawing and artsy type games were never really up my alley because I'm not that good at arts and crafts, but I can see the appeal that a lot of other kids would find in this one. Jellyfish Dodge is a 4-game compilation consisting of a breakout game again, a snowball fight equivalent of those old classic tank arcade games where you and another player can change the power and angle of your shots to try and blow each other up back and forth in a turn-based style combat system, a puzzle game that guides jellyfish to SpongeBob's net, which seems slow and boring honestly, I really could not sit through this footage very long, and lastly the main title game, Jellyfish Dodge, where you have to avoid all these jellyfish that are trying to hurt you in a Bomberman-styled grid. They each do different things based on the color of the jellyfish, and combined can create a lot of different various attack combos that are very difficult to avoid, it seems. This game is stretched out across multiple levels, as are the rest of the games, so, you know, this one's on par with the first two I talked about. Given that there's only 4 games in this one compared to the 5 that are in the others, I guess maybe there's a little more length to them, but ultimately the same level of quality from what I'm observing. Lastly, there's the Bikini Bottom 500, which is basically just a racing game where you never really turn, it seems. Basically, you're just avoiding obstacles and racing against opponents to hopefully reach the end in first place while you drive directly in a straight line most of the time. Supposedly, it's motion sensitive, which is cool, and the game comes with 5 different courses, so there is some variety there. The game also keeps track of your stats that you can see in the menu, which is neat, and you have a selection of classic SpongeBob characters to choose from for you to play as, of course. Your boat also has a health bar in this one too, so if you take a certain amount of damage, you'll end up forfeiting the race, similar to the way the Boating Bash worked in those racing games, if you recall. This game was only released a year before Boating Bash 2, and while it's not graphically impressive, this was at the height of the Wii's popularity, so it totally makes sense to me that there would be a focus on motion controls present here. I mean, overall, this one's cool, I guess. The controller's kinda unique, and if I had to rate it amongst all the controllers, it is the most visually distinct. Also, apologies for not really discussing the controller heads for the other plug-and-play devices before talking about all the games. Most of them are obviously SpongeBob themed, and I wish I could show them off physically on camera. I feel like I'd have more to say about them if I could, but since I don't own any of them, we'll just have to settle with these images I put on screen instead. These things always seemed pretty cool to me, and even if the games contained within them weren't ever the greatest, the plastic molds were always appealing to see what cool concepts they could come up with. I mean, in this case, you could literally use SpongeBob's nose as the joystick. That's pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, ultimately, even if the plug-and-play games are kind of forgettable for the most part and more of a budget quality compared to what the fully fledged 3D games could be, there's definitely some nostalgia here to be found for those kids out there that did get to play these things growing up. I don't particularly have anything negative to say for the most of these because they aren't bad games, just sorta mediocre really. At this point though, I'm kinda ready to move past the archaic games of the past and get into some more modern stuff. So let's go ahead and just jump a decade and some change ahead and see what sort of games the 2020s have in store for us now, shall we? Here's something I'm surprised to be talking about on my channel actually. Minecraft. Despite being a fan of the game ever since I first got into it all the way back in September of 2011, yes, back when Minecraft was still in beta, I never really expected to be talking about this in a video because I never knew when my subject matter was ever going to cross over. But apparently 2022 was the year that happened with SpongeBob, at least. Yes, in 2022, Minecraft released a crossover DLC adventure pack with Nickelodeon to bring SpongeBob and crew into Minecraft Bedrock Edition, complete with its own little mini adventure in Bikini Bottom. The pack comes with a ton of cool skins for characters from the show, along with several variety outfits as well that you can choose from as a player, which is pretty cool, I gotta say. They even have some episode-specific stuff here from the classic seasons, which honestly, it is cool to see how much the first 3 seasons of the show still continue to influence a lot of the games that are being released decades later. Just goes to show how influential those early seasons were, let's be real. And hey, there's some references to other seasons of the show too, if you look for them, such as the Mitten in Glove World, or the rooms in SpongeBob's house. house. You got the stuffed animal weight set and study, for example. But yes, as for this Minecraft DLC, it starts with you in a room with Painty the Pirate, who asks if you're ready, kids. And after a hearty aye aye captain, you're sent down into the depths where Bikini Bottom lies below. Where you, the player, come to meet Spongebob, who asks you to run around Bikini Bottom helping all of his friends so that together you guys can make this the best day ever. A reference alluding to the Best Day Ever episode from the cartoon, which again is cool, it's outside the first 3 seasons. From there, you're given a map of Bikini Bottom to follow, which highlights all of the waypoints that you need to go to so that you can assist the denizens of Bikini Bottom with their tasks. Most of these quests are pretty simple, but fun and in theme with the character in particular that you're assisting. For instance, Squidward needs you to get an instrument so you can join him and SpongeBob in a concert that you need to put on for a crowd. And so you can run around Squidward's house finding different materials to create a few different instruments that you can then play for the public, including a beloved favorite instrument, mayonnaise. Yes, Patrick, mayonnaise is indeed an instrument. In Minecraft, at least. There's all sorts of other cool side quests to do that I really enjoyed too. Actually, I don't think there was a single one I didn't at least find some fun in. Patrick wants you to go to Glove World so you can assist the construction crew in finishing the new roller coaster there, and then your reward for doing so is getting to ride it, which of course takes advantage of Minecraft's minecarts in order to do so. I will say that the Minecraft aesthetic translated the SpongeBob IP into its graphical style pretty well, all things considered. I mean, there's tons of recognizable set pieces and characters all throughout the level map, and I really appreciate that the character designers actually decided to take designs that were already in the cartoon and translate them into Minecraft, rather than coming up with just generic NPC designs. And hey, there's even some less recurring characters present here like Kevin the Sea Cucumber and Smitty Werb and Jagerman Jensen, which absolutely killed me when I saw him as a face amongst the crowd. The map is pretty cool too. It's a little spacious, so I recommend finding a boatmobile and hopping in that to ride around if you can, since it'll speed up travel in between locations. And some of the characters you need to assist are pretty spread out here, while others are more condensed together. The Flying Dutchman's ship, for example, is stranded out in the kelp forest, so if you want to help him get his cannons back, you're gonna have to make the trek down there in order to get them for him. And doing so rewards you in a cannon shooting minigame where you can try and get the highest score possible within a 3-minute time limit. I thought this was cool though, intertwining 2 different settings into one, sorta. Obviously my mind is comparing basically all of these games to Battle for Bikini Bottom at the end of the day because that game is peak, but I appreciate that none of these titles are just blatant copies of that game either. I definitely noticed that Glove World has been a popular setting that's used in all post-2020 SpongeBob games though. I mean, it showed up in the Cosmic Shake and I thought that was a bit refreshing, but now I'm seeing it here in Minecraft, and this isn't even the last time we're seeing it in this video either. And yet outside of Glove World, it doesn't feel like there's many other settings that these SpongeBob games feel the need to use that weren't already in Battle for Bikini Bottom, right? I mean, like, yeah, some common areas like Jellyfish Fields and Goo Lagoon make sense that they'd show up a lot, but there's plenty of other settings that are present in SpongeBob besides the same few mainstays, right? I mean, we don't need the kelp forest in every single SpongeBob video game. That's something I sort of wish the Cosmic Shake did better. We got the Dunces and Dragons area, and that was awesome, but couldn't we get some other cool levels too? Like, what about visiting Atlantis again, or many of the other numerous locations that were in various SpongeBob specials? Or going to one of the numerous islands in the universe, like Karate Island or the Bikini Bottom Triangle. The Industrial Park could get a full level. Heck, we could even go to Makeout Reef.
Hey man, that's not cool.
Okay, maybe not that last one. Plankton has a cool mission where you actually get tricked by Karen into getting trapped inside the chum bucket, and the whole goal of the challenge is to escape it by solving some redstone puzzles, a giant maze, and some other awesome obstacle courses to get out. I really enjoyed this one, as it took me back to when I downloaded obstacle course maps back in like 2012, and my one friend and I would play through them on our own server I had set up through Hamachi. If any of you watching remember when that was the most common way to play Minecraft, yeah. Good times. Mr. Krab's mission is a cool reference to the first episode Help Wanted, in which you and SpongeBob have to fend off all the anchovies that keep showing up in waves to destroy the cash register. It's another score-based minigame like the Cannon game though, but it's fun nonetheless. I think I forgot to mention it, but I really like how SpongeBob also follows you around while you're doing all of these quests. It's like he's your friend tagging along for the ride, and I thought that was cool. Sandy's mission is also pretty interesting because you're basically helping her launch a rocket, which I found enjoyable. It's more redstone puzzles basically, but they're fun to solve. I always thought redstone one was so fascinating in Minecraft anyways because there's just so much you can do with it, more than I could ever even comprehend or figure out how to make work. The stuff that people have come up with is insane. The last 2 side quests consist of one for Pearl, which is just a reference to pizza delivery as you go deliver pizzas to Squilliam, Mermaid Man, and Barnacle Boy, which was an awesome appearance to see, and Larry, who must be on his cheat day or something. It's a fine enough mission, but pretty basic. And then there's Mrs. Puff's mission, which is just a race you have to win against the competition of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, Man Ray, the Dirty Bubble, the Flying Dutchman, and Doodle Bob. Dang, didn't expect to see him here. That's pretty cool too. I did like this race fine enough, although I will say my game glitched not once but twice when after completing it Mrs. Puff just didn't spawn, so I couldn't complete it the first time when I won, nor could I request to try again when I lost the second time to Man Ray. But thankfully, third time was the charm here. I was genuinely starting to worry during my third race that I was gonna have to come to you guys in this video and tell you I couldn't finish it because Mrs. Puff just would not spawn, but luckily on the third attempt she did, so I can move onward. And yeah, after completing the last character quest, you're greeted to SpongeBob thanking you for making this the best day ever. And then you get warped to a special thank you ceremony where all the characters dance and bask in your glory while fireworks explode in the background, a climactic celebration bringing this little Bikini Bottom adventure to a close. Honestly, for the most part, this ain't bad. Sure, it's only about an hour-long experience, so maybe not worth the price of admission, but overall, it was charming at least. It's well put together and definitely feels like an accurate translation into Minecraft, and I can recommend it to people if you're into this sort of thing. Just don't expect a ton of material with this one. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot to do beyond completing these missions for the characters, so after exploring the map for a meager 15 minutes or so, you'll probably have your fill. Still, cool that it exists at all. Here's hoping it doesn't get locked away for eternity due to some stupid licensing terms ending sometime within the next handful of years, although, you know, I'm almost certain it will. Time will have to tell on that one.
Oh my goodness! Breaking news! It seems the town has suddenly and inexplicably become covered in a thick layer of dirt and muck.
This next game's a bit odd, all things considered, but not in a bad way. It's just different. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Different. PowerWash Simulator. Not exactly the kind of game I would have expected SpongeBob to cross over with, but, you know, hey, I appreciate it for being unique at the very least. The basic gist of this game is that it's meant to be a more relaxing kind of game. Essentially, as the name implies, you're going around to different sites and cleaning all of the dirt and grime off of the surface of structures that you're tasked with cleaning until everything is spotless without so much as an atom of dirt left on anything. This is basically a video game version of those oddly satisfying videos where you see someone go and clean something that's extremely dirty with pristine care, to where the precision itself of watching something go from gross to squeaky clean has its own psychological gratification tied to it. And you know, there's definitely a place for that. I myself find that I like the occasional chill video game where I don't have to try too hard and just can kind of do a menial task, you know? I feel that this sort of game is best as a something to do while on a Discord call kind of game, you know? Just something to do in the background while you're talking with your friends and hanging out or something. It's a very time-consuming game, that's for sure, especially depending on the amount of surface area you're required to clean in a given location. But of course, the main subject we're discussing in this video is the Spongebob DLC, so that's what I'm going to focus on here. I could go into all of the mechanics of the entire game, but that's not really the subject matter of today's video, so I'm not really going to give an in-depth review of PowerWash Simulator itself, just the DLC. So, as far as that SpongeBob-specific DLC is concerned, PowerWash Simulator contains 6 new maps, all themed around locations within Bikini Bottom and adjacent areas. Conch Street, of course, contains SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward's houses that are all covered in grime for you to clean up. There's the Bikini Bottom bus, which is set in Rock Bottom. That's pretty cool. They even have the vending machine, which is awesome. And then you can turn around and wash the classic orange bus that you've seen throughout the show plenty of times. There's the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket as well, and the last 3 areas are then the Paddy Wagon, Invisible Boatmobile, and Mermalair. I actually really think that these selected areas are cool for the most part, although I kinda wish the paddy wagon was lumped into the Krusty Krab area and we got one more level in the form of something like Sandy's Tree Dome instead. Still, the invisible boatmobile looks really cool given that it actually starts out visible and then slowly turns invisible as you clean it. These levels also have ongoing dialogue between SpongeBob and other characters that pop up to tell a mini story while you complete more and more of the level. So that's a nicely added detail that enhances the game a little bit. Even if there's no voice acting again, which is a common theme I've really begun to notice is occurring in almost all of these games I'm talking about. Beyond these maps though, this is really where the depth of the DLC ends. Now, in fairness, I imagine that if I had played more of the base game, I'd get to use a lot of the unlockable equipment and upgrades for this DLC pack, so I imagine it probably wouldn't take me as long to complete these levels. For perspective, and granted this was my first time playing the game ever, it took me over an hour just to clear Conch Street, so I knew this was going to be a time investment going into it to complete all 6 stages, and even more of one if I chose to play the base game first before jumping right into the DLC. I mean, I at least had access to several different nozzles that allowed for different angles and spread, as you would expect with most standard power washers. And there's also special soaps you can utilize as well to clean certain surfaces like metal or glass a lot faster than with just the washer. I find it kind of amusing that this game takes place underwater, so you're essentially pressure washing with water underwater, but I guess you're not really supposed to question it too much, just like the actual show. Supposedly, this DLC is actually shorter than the other DLC packs though, and on that note, this game has crossed over with a few other IPs such as Final Fantasy, Warhammer 40k, Back to the Future, and everybody's favorite, Shrek. However, the quantity and length of the DLC packs just mean more levels for the fans of the game to play. While on the surface the game doesn't seem like it's all that exciting, it's all kind of in the eye of the beholder, and I actually don't think it's a very bad game at all. It serves its purpose quite well. While the title is certainly niche, I see a lot of the appeal and I probably will end up playing more of the game in my own leisure time later on. It really is a nice game to just kind of relax with, although I'm surprised it didn't have a VR version available because this is a first-person game that could probably make for a good VR title. Either way though, I definitely can recommend this for people who enjoy this sort of game style, but it's not for everyone. So if this doesn't really look up your alley, then you probably won't like this as much.
Powerful stuff there, folks. Hey, Tony, any idea where I parked my car?
Okay, this next title is going to be pretty cool to talk about because for the first time ever on my channel, we're going to be looking at a VR game. Back in December of 2023, B4T Games' own VR title, Epic Roller Coasters, received a DLC update to the game featuring 5 new SpongeBob SquarePants themed roller coasters that players can experience in a full-blown VR realm. The game is available on most VR platforms such as Meta, Steam, and PlayStation, the latter of the 3 being my service of choice given that I spent more money than I should have a year ago on buying a PSVR 2 because I thought it'd be really cool only to come and find out that I hardly have any time to play any video games anymore unless I'm making a YouTube video about it, and on top of that, most of the games I want to play are Meta exclusives, so that sorta hasn't worked out for me either. PlayStation's support of the PSVR 2 has been lackluster in my opinion, which has also been disappointing, but hey, Call of the Mountain was extremely mind-blowing to me as my first ever VR experience, so yeah, I'm a little late to the party on this one, but better late than never, right? Regardless, we're here to talk about the SpongeBob VR roller coasters, so that's what we're gonna do. Just a heads up to anyone who might get motion sickness, there is going to be a lot of first-person camera movement from the perspective of a roller coaster, so if you think that might mess with your head a little bit, feel free to scroll on down or look away and just listen to the audio for the next section. I will say that watching the SpongeBob footage back on a computer screen doesn't bother me too bad given it's in a more cartoony art style as opposed to a realistic one, but either way, viewer discretion is advised. So Epic Roller Coasters, fundamentally, is a game where you ride a bunch of different roller coasters in a VR setting. It's a very immersive experience that can trick your brain into thinking you're actually moving on a roller coaster, as the VR headset, audio, and controllers all work in tandem with each other to respond to the visuals of the footage the viewer is currently watching. The game has a bunch of themes and a few different modes, and I'll be upfront, I ain't paying for all of the added coasters beyond the free stuff stuff in SpongeBob, but there's a lot of other cool expansion packs for things like real places and super roller coasters, which are more fantasy based. You can go to places like Stonehenge, Yellowstone, the Colosseum, or even Antarctica. Or you can stumble into a wyvern siege, a zombie apocalypse, or a cyberpunk city. Man, it really sounds like I'm advertising this, doesn't it? Not sponsored though, just throwing that out there. Not sponsored. I'm not trying to sound like a commercial or anything. There's the classic roller coaster mode where you just ride the ride like a normal experience. There's a race mode where you can control the speed of the coaster as you move along the track to try and get the best time without derailing. I find the ability to judge if a coaster is going too fast or not to be a bit hard to discern in certain circumstances though, so you definitely need to play this mode on the more careful side. And then lastly, there's the shooter mode where they summon a bunch of targets and you need to shoot as many as you can in a combo chain to earn the most points possible. Also, I just want to apologize for the footage in this video having this helmet overlay on screen. I hadn't realized it would come out looking this way in the raw footage I captured. It's there because in VR it helps with motion sickness by reducing the field of view with the VR headset, which I desperately needed, as I'll explain soon, but had I known the footage would come out this way, I would have removed it and just recorded the game in more sittings. Also, the right side of the screen is a bit distorted, so once again, I apologize for that front. I'm really not sure what happened with my capture card. I tried re-recording this game, but I keep getting the same exact problem, so I'm not really sure what to do to fix it, and I couldn't really find any evidence in quick Google searches, but hey, maybe I just missed it or something. Either way, let's just dive into the SpongeBob stuff here and see what we've got. And for starters, I want to highlight that the game also has a lobby area where you can access the main HUD menu and buy the expansions and choose your modes, courses, etc. You can even customize your cart and the passengers that ride alongside you if you want anyone with you, and let me tell you, some of them are weird. But I bring this up because there's a SpongeBob lobby area too, featuring all of the main cast of Bikini Bottom scattered around this environment. It's not super interactive given that you're stationary and placed behind this control screen, but it's a neat thing regardless because you get to see Patrick stuck up against the glass above like an actual starfish, and Squidward even treats you to some exquisite music as he plays his clarinet for you while you navigate the menu. It's a lot more interesting than the other environment hubs, which are more barren and empty by comparison, so I definitely love this one. As for the coasters, there's 5 main ones to experience, so we're just going to run down the list in the order that I played them, starting with what I would pretty much say is tied for the best one right off the bat. Glove World Expresso, which basically consists of SpongeBob and Patrick running around the theme park of Glove World while you make your way deeper and deeper inside until you eventually reach the Fiery Fist o' Pain, which is the highlight of the ride by far. Pretty genius for them to not only make a reference to this ride, but straight up create the whole thing in VR. There's even a cool finale where you go all the way up through the surface and breach the water, where you can see the island above that's in the intro of the show before crashing all the way back down at high speed. Really fun Easter egg there. Second up is My Krabby Patty, in which Plankton breaks into the Krusty Krab with a giant robot and steals the secret formula, so it's up to you and SpongeBob to get it back. Again, this is a pretty fun one that actually has more of a story to it than the rest of the tracks, given there's an actual objective here to accomplish while you're chasing down Plankton. It would have been cool if there was more interactivity in this one where you could actually like shoot Plankton in some sort of boss fight or something. I feel like that'd make the experience more interactive and immersive than just watching the characters jump around a bunch, but it's not the end of the world. There is a cannon that spawns on the cart at a point to shoot down the robot too, but you don't actually get to control it. It happens automatically, so given that there's also a shooting minigame mode in this, it just feels like a missed opportunity all around. Unless that is what the shooting minigame is. Oh, I didn't think to test that. My biggest issue with this though is that none of the characters talk. Presumably, nobody wanted to shell out the cash to get the voice actors to reprise their roles for this, so instead you're just stuck watching this whole simulation play out with character reactions and expressions instead of any actual dialogue, similar to the Minecraft DLC that we've covered, although in this one's case I feel like there's less of an excuse. Sure, maybe it'd be weird to have voice acting in this game considering every other DLC pack has no such thing as characters and stories in a thematic setting the way that the SpongeBob pack does, at least from my observation, but I don't know, I think that could be cool and it'd make the experience more engaging if I'm being honest. There's no reason why it couldn't be there. This coaster track is a little less extreme than the previous one though, which isn't a bad thing. There's only one loop and for the most part it's a much more tame, length-based coaster, which I enjoy. I'm actually a total coaster junkie in real life, believe it or not, and after having played this game I actually think I'm going to stick to just the real ones, The footage you're seeing now is me putting the headset down so I can try to stop the feeling of nausea that was welling up in me. I'll be honest guys, for the very first time in my life, something actually gave me motion sickness. Now, I'll be the first to admit I don't play a lot of VR games, mostly because I don't have the time, but I came into this thinking, oh yeah, it's only half an hour of footage I need to get, I can totally handle that, no problem. And then by the time I was finished with this coaster, I was absolutely out of it. I felt so sick to my stomach, my eyes and brain were not happy, and yeah, I genuinely had to get up and take a break because I just couldn't take it. It also doesn't help that the PSVR 2 headpiece is extremely uncomfortable because no matter what I do to try and adjust it, I just can't get the thing to sit comfortably on my head. And that's an honest criticism I want to warn anyone about before considering getting this. This thing is not comfortable in the slightest. I've even seen people suggest wearing a beanie while playing it to help alleviate the stress it puts on your skull, and I seriously have to consider that the next time I pick this thing up. But anyways, my personal motion sickness story shouldn't get in the way of the experience I'm reviewing, so let's go ahead and take a look at the last 3 coasters. For the next one, still feeling sick to my stomach, I decided to go for Snow Slide since it's a bobsled themed one and there wouldn't be a ton of loops or twists, just relatively flat land to slide along. In this one, it's basically just a bobsled race between SpongeBob and Patrick, you, and Plankton while a bunch of nameless background characters get flung off the stage in the first half, and then it devolves into a bunch of twists and turns around slopes while Sandy flies around in her acorn helicopter. The most memorable part for me was going through the cave that collapses in on you, not because of that, but because my cat decided to start clawing at my couch, and she ended up interrupting the ride for me. But she's too adorable that I just couldn't help but put her in my video. She sure likes to find as many ways as she can to get shoutouts in them, it seems, but hey, can you blame her? Anyways, yeah, that's the most tame out of all of them. The next one is the Ghost Coaster, and this one's Flying Dutchman themed. Speaking of my cat, that was her again. No story really though, it's mostly just taking the concept of a haunted house-esque ride themed after the Flying Dutchman and applying it to a roller coaster. I really like this one too though, it's tied for my favorite alongside Glove World due to both the theming, overall coaster track, and I just always love the darker atmosphere highlighted by the green hue emitted by the ghostly ghost pirate that is the Flying Dutchman. There's a cool part where you get to go inside the ship a few times, which has a really awesome aesthetic with the particle effects and light shining through, plus the Dutchman himself shows up to haunt you for a bit, and then you end up going into this giant dirty sock pile, which is a nice reference to the show that I appreciated, before ending things off. Lastly comes Sunday at Goo Lagoon, which is obviously themed after the beach area of the same name from the cartoon, and features you going around the coastline while you witness SpongeBob and Patrick pester Squidward the whole time. You get to go by a bunch of beachgoers before making your way up around a lighthouse that sends you spiraling over the water, which honestly reminds me of the Velocicoaster at Universal Studios. I know this is a slight tangent, but I really want to ride that roller coaster someday. It looks like an absolutely incredible launch coaster where the entire second half of the ride actually looks more exciting and intense than the first half, and I am all for that. This part here I'm showing you is what I'm referring to with this Goo Lagoon track, by the way. For those curious, I don't have a favorite roller coaster of all time, but my favorite theme parks of the ones I've been to are Hershey Park and Cedar Point. Anyways, yes, the rest of the coaster goes around the Goo Lagoon pier before heading into this massive shipwreck area that's kind of cool as you get to look at this broken shipyard while you swing around the environment before coming back around to the other side of the pier and heading over to the massive sandcastle, which really just about wraps things up with a final ride alongside Muscle Beach before ending things off at a sunset where SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward hang out with you. And that's the end of that. Overall, I definitely think the production value of these 5 coasters is solid, and anyone who likes this sort of motion simulator experience will definitely get a kick out of it. To bring it back to the Universal Studios comment I made earlier, I feel like these would be really cool if this was translated to an experience that had the added bells and whistles that a Universal ride would have, because it basically felt like I was experiencing one, just with a VR headset in my living room instead of 3D glasses at the real Universal theme parks. These are definitely nice for a little fun distraction of amusement, but in truth, I wouldn't spend $10 on this. I waited for a sale months ago in anticipation for this video prior to making it, and I'd suggest you do the same. Just get it on sale, and you won't be disappointed. Just don't be me and power through the full experience in one sitting if you can't visually handle it. Take frequent breaks, and do not feel pressured to experience it all at once. I seriously regret forcing it myself based on how I felt afterward, and if I wasn't recording for a video, I would have definitely stopped. I've read it takes time to get used to VR stimulation, so I'm definitely gonna need to take it easy when I start to immerse myself into more VR games. Hopefully one day I'll be able to talk about more VR stuff in general because the whole medium intrigues me, but I guess we'll just see what happens. Man, this video has become a really strange one for me. Not only have I talked about Minecraft and VR games in this adventure so far, but now we're switching over to Roblox. Roblox! Now, suffice to say Roblox's immense popularity cannot be understated. This game has been massively successful with young millennials and Gen Z for well over a decade at this point, and I too had once found myself to be a part of that mix. I actually was big on Roblox all the way back in the ancient year of 2009, 7th grade to be precise, when a few of my friends that I would hang out with would play it all the time and eventually got me into it. I'll admit, I'm not the most versed when it comes to the vast landscape that Roblox has evolved into today, but back in the day, I had countless times of enjoyment just trying to compete in obbies and the like. The game back then certainly doesn't appear to have the sheer amount of variety in games that the platform has nowadays. And actually, now that I think about it, I also got back into it in 2017 when I had a certain group of friends that unfortunately disbanded, but we used to play all sorts of games from natural disasters to competitive cops and robbers to tower defense to CSGO to a survival parody, all sorts of games that I really remember enjoying with them. Man. Do I miss those days? But that's besides the point. We're here to talk about Spongebob Simulator, an officially licensed SpongeBob game released for Roblox in 2024 that anybody can experience for free. Wild to think that something like this exists at all. Again, this is coming from somebody who remembers when people would just load in low-quality JPEGs as a 2D plane in obbies from the old days, so to see a fully developed experience in this is surreal to say the least. But jumping right into the game, we're loaded into a hub world with a bunch of different sections that basically just exist for everybody's favorite addition to video games in the 2010s, microtransactions. Yeah, I'm not wasting my money on any of this predatory nonsense. Instead, I'm just gonna shift my focus over to the gameplay of this one. So, you got any guesses as to what it might be? A platforming-based adventure? Maybe a text-based mystery? Maybe yet another minigame compilation? Nah, try Grinding Simulator 2024. This game is boring as Like, okay, I intentionally avoid games like this in general because they're super scummy and predatory, but like, this is such a nothing of a game, it's actually insulting. This is Number Go Up Simulator. This is Overstimulate Your Dopamine Receptors SpongeBob Edition. This is not a game. Like, the core gameplay of this experience, it's not a game. Basically, what you do is you punch some clams, get some buddies, turn on the auto attack, and then walk around and pick up coins, rubies, and items while the buddies do all the work. As you progress forward, I mean, yeah, you can upgrade the buddies, get more coins, get more rubies, move further along, grind more, upgrade more, grind more, upgrade more, and progress forward, maybe? I mean, ultimately, that's what this amounts to. It's a mindless vessel for you to watch numbers go up and satisfy an itch that your brain might crave. It's honestly awful. It feels so invasive, so predatory, so heinous. Like, I feel like this is intentionally trying to get people addicted. I mean, I at least like the variety in the buddies you can get, I guess, because they're based on the show, but have a bunch of different variants that all provide certain values in damage and speed and whatnot. And the variety in environments is pretty cool. I mean, like I was commenting on Glove World, it usually feels like a lot of these games just use the same few areas, but in all fairness, SpongeBob Simulator really expanded to even more environments beyond the few basic ones we see a million times over. But despite that, I can't really commend this for anything because it hardly feels like a game, and none of these environments change the gameplay up at all. I mean, you're doing the same thing no matter whether you're on Conch Street or Kelp Forest or downtown Bikini Bottom. Like, okay, sure, there are objective requirements you can meet, and there is admittedly some exploration involved where you can run around the world looking for hidden items to unlock new character skins, so like, I'll give it that. And you can eventually get a mount which you can use to drive around with, which is also fun, so like, more depth does become apparent as you move along, but it's not enough to take away from the core gameplay mechanics being this drab lack of interactivity. Like, the game ultimately requires nothing of me. I'm literally just walking around while it plays itself as I pick up the currency to unlock the next arena. I don't feel any sort of meaningful connection to anything here. This is such a short attention span focused game that it's like, oh my god, is this actually what children enjoy? Like, I try not to sound like some crotchety old man. I mean, I'm in my late 20s. I'm not like super old, but like even games when I was a kid were not like this, at least the ones I played. I mean, I was playing Pokemon, I was playing Sonic. Like, they didn't have this microtransaction nonsense. They didn't have these overstimulating number go up things. Like, it's like, this is nothing. This is just nothing. I'm honestly having, like, I'm going off script right now, guys. I'm having a crisis over this. Like, this is the state of video games right now. I can't believe it. I cannot believe that this is what video games are. Like, I'm going completely off script right now, and I apologize. But like, I don't know. I can't enjoy those sorts of video games. They just feel so predatory, so scummy. Like, the priority of those games is not to be a game. It's to feed on the addictive nature that people are susceptible to and get them to pay money with their wallets to these corporations for like nothing. Like, I don't know. I'm not trying to come across as some pompous, like, higher ego person or whatever, but it's like, I feel like my taste in games is more sophisticated than this. I really don't see the appeal in it. I mean, no offense to anybody that wants to play these sorts of things, more power to you, but it's like, I can't get behind it. If I'm gonna play a video game, I want like an actual fulfilling experience. I'm not looking to gamble. Like, I'm not looking for number go up, make me brain happy type deal. Like, that's not what I want out of a video game. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry for tangenting and going off script here, but I really felt the need to include that because like is this really what people are okay with? Like, do people like this sort of, I don't know. Maybe I'm out of touch.
No, it's the children who are wrong.
But anyway, okay, let's get back to it. So the game ultimately requires nothing of me. I'm literally just walking around while the game plays itself as I just pick up the currency to unlock the next area. I don't feel any sort of meaningful connection to anything here. There's no story, and the characters don't really talk to anyone or about anything beyond giving you the objectives to meet, and it's like, I get it, this isn't that sort of single-player game that a lot of the mainline titles try to be, but this still just doesn't feel like it amounts to anything whatsoever. And also, there are no voices in this game, just like the Minecraft pack, so like, they didn't have to pay the voice actors or anything, which it's not the end of the world, but like, it's kind of noticeable. But again, this is Roblox, so I'm also not expecting that sort of thing. This is the honest epitome of how ugly a video game can be at preying on the minds of its players, locking them into this gambling-like state. This right here is literally addictive brain rot incarnate. I honestly could not believe my eyes while playing it. I mean, there is literal gambling with the clams and rolling to get rare buddies, but you know, hey, this is a common practice in a bunch of video games. It's not specific to this Roblox game, so like, I'm not losing sleep over it, and I'm not like trying to bash this game too much. I mean, Roblox is not a terrible game by anything. If you can responsibly handle this sort of thing, then, you know, hey, have your fun. I just worry for those that are susceptible to this sort of practice because, again, this game is aimed at younger ages, and when there's all these places to spend Robux by spending real money to get further along, aka pay to win, it just doesn't gel with me from a moral and ethical standpoint. I mean, this is the exact same reason why I don't play mobile games. It's just, I just cannot agree with these sorts of practices. I mean, they clearly work, or these companies wouldn't still be doing it in the industry 15 years after they were introduced, but like, still, I cannot enjoy games that do this sort of thing. I will not support companies more than I have to. I don't particularly care for Spongebob Simulator, and I personally will never return to this one. I do not approve of this sort of thing. I'd rather have a more enriching experience in my game beyond this bare bones nothing of a time waster. No offense to Roblox fans either. There are dozens of great games out there for this platform. As I praised earlier in this section, there are plenty of titles and experiences that I've greatly enjoyed with this. So please do not take this the wrong way. I think there can be a ton of fun to be had on Roblox if you look for the right games. It's just that this one ain't it. This is greedy and predatory, and the writing's on the wall. I'm not a fan, and I do not approve. It is such a shame too. I really had my hopes up for this one. If Minecraft was able to impress me, I thought Roblox was going to be able to do the same thing, but no, I cannot get behind this. I will never play it again. I'm honestly disgusted at what I had to see. Let's move on to the next game. Next, we're heading back to Minecraft once again because 2 years later in 2024, Minecraft released another SpongeBob-related pack for the Bedrock edition of the game, this time referred to as an add-on rather than DLC like the previous one was. Here, instead of developing a full-blown adventure level and items and characters designed around SpongeBob, they decided to recycle a bunch of the stuff they made for the adventure pack 2 years prior and simply translated it into Minecraft's main survival mode, allowing players to run into SpongeBob characters in their own randomly generated Minecraft worlds and assist the characters with quests in the form of similar yet different minigames than what came before. After assisting the character with their quest, you can place their home into your world, essentially crafting your own Bikini Bottom right there in Minecraft, which is neat, I guess, but I'll be honest, this pack doesn't impress me nearly as much as the first one did. It feels like the lesser of the two by a considerable mile when taking into account the quest games these characters give are less involved and rather mundane if I'm being honest. One mission has you catch 12 jellyfish, another has you playing Simon Says with Squidward while playing an instrument, and don't even get me started on the utterly annoying mission for Mr. Krabs where you have to feed 12 anchovies simultaneously, except their spawn rate is all over the place, and after they finish eating, they don't count towards your final score anymore, which means even if you feed 10 or 11 guys, they don't count after they finish, which personally makes zero sense to me because from a logical perspective, they still consumed a meal. Their belly is still full. It's not like the Krabby Patty just left their innards after they finished eating. Even in the original cartoon that this minigame is referencing, once they ate a Krabby Patty, they were satisfied and went away. Mr. Krabs still charged them for that first patty, even if they won a second. Like, whatever, I digress. The mission sucks, especially once night rolls around, it just becomes an absolute pain. Yeah, there's items that you can get in survival mode, which is kind of cool, I guess, like a bubble wand or a chum gun or a Krabby Patty cannon, but honestly, aside from the brief 30 seconds of enjoyments that these things will give you, I grew bored of these very quickly. Half of the NPCs feel utterly pointless because they honestly don't do anything, and unlike the previous DLC where they served purposes such as being opponents to a race or members of an audience at your concert, here they're just completely out of place and serve what feels like no purpose. I'm gonna be honest, while the last pack felt somewhat worth the money, dude, I wouldn't even pay $1 for this one. It's not very exciting at all. The bosses didn't wow me either, and yeah, just overall, I'm not a fan. I mean, I wish we got something to the same level of effort that was the first pack, but I'm just not feeling it with this one. And that's why I'm keeping this review so short. The insides of the houses that you can place were also less detailed and smaller than the previous ones you could explore, and for the most part, a lot of this pack just feels copied and pasted from the previous one, like I mentioned. The amount of effort here just did not compare. It just didn't. I mean, I guess it's fine enough for those that might like this sort of thing. You definitely get SpongeBob themed stuff in survival mode, so you know, if that's your thing, you'll probably like it. But for me personally, I already have a better experience in SpongeBob Minecraft to compare this to, and as a result, I just find this one to be lesser in almost every way. Again, I don't hate this by any means, it just sort of exists, but it doesn't really add to the experience of playing Minecraft in survival mode. If anything, I feel this would be an out-of-place distraction rather than an enhancing thing that I had the chance of running into, but hey, that's just me. I'm sure it has its fans, so.
What a beautiful day in Bikini Bottom. No storms or other natural disasters in sight. There's nothing and no one its happy citizens should worry about.
Good morning!
Well, maybe there is someone.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, let's go! Excuse me, coming through!
Okay, arguably the main event of this entire video, I have saved the best for last. The Patrick Star game, released in the fall of 2024, is the first ever SpongeBob video game to feature Patrick Star and only Patrick Star as the main playable character of the game. This isn't your typical SpongeBob platformer either. This is more of an open sandbox-like game where you're just thrown into this contained environment with the freedom to run around, have fun, mess with stuff, and interact with all sorts of items and environmental set pieces to see what sort of creative fun can be had. A la Goat Simulator, basically. This sort of game definitely puts the power in the hands of the player to make their own fun. The game is what you make of it. Sure, there's objectives and feats and all that, but really, the most fun of this game is just finding all sorts of the various activities that the devs had put into it for you to have fun and discover and enjoy. While I've certainly been detached from modern SpongeBob seasons for quite some time now, if I had to guess, I fell off the series somewhere around season 8. I've definitely seen news of things that have come out in the 2020s decade, such as Sponge on the Run, the Sandy Cheeks movie, and the Patrick Star Show, which I suppose is loosely referential to this game being the Patrick Star game, but honestly, if there is a connection between the show and this game, I'm failing to see it. I don't know much about the Patrick Star Show. All I do know is that the series has Patrick starring as some sort of television series main character and wacky hijinks ensues, but none of that sort of thing is present here in the Patrick Star game, so for all intents and purposes, I think this is a completely separate experience. That being said, this game's pretty good. Sure, it's no Marvel of the Decade or anything close to that, but in a rather dry year for video games as a whole, that being 2024, the Patrick Star game shines as a pleasant romp through Bikini Bottom that right out the gate, I can say I recommend. 100%ing this game took me roughly 6 hours to complete start to finish, so this isn't a very long title that you have to sink days of your life into or anything. It sells below the regular retail price of a full-length AAA video game title, so I'd say you'll probably get your money's worth out of it, but honestly, waiting for a sale might not be a bad idea since this game likely won't blow you away. But you know, if you approach it with the mindset that this is meant to be a short, fun game to run around and explore, then you'll have a good time. It's quaint, it's charming. There isn't really much of a story to this game per se. Really, it just begins with Patrick waking up from his dream, which was a pretty direct reference to Sleepy Time, and then he basically just gets to run around and do whatever he wants around Bikini Bottom. No real story whatsoever, but plenty of character interactions are at play here where you can go around and help various characters with tasks. Sandy needs you to clean up a bunch of different areas covered in purple goop, while Squidward asks you to push away all these annoying background characters so that he can sunbathe in peace. And SpongeBob has you go around and complete all these coconut shooting minigames. All of the voice actors return to voice their respective characters in this game, and they do a good job as always, so I don't really have much to say because it's the same cast you already know and love. Honestly, it feels like the theme of most of the games I've covered today are that they all consist of nothing but minigame compilations, which is a weird consistency I've noticed, but that's besides the point. All of the quests available are decently fun, and none of them ever get too redundant to where it becomes monotonous or boring. They don't overstay their welcome. The map of Bikini Bottom is a perfect size too, I would say. Nothing is ever incredibly cumbersome to get to, nor is it a hassle to complete any of the objectives that require you to run across the entire map, such as when you have to feed a slice of bubble pie to King Jellyfish, or deliver Smitty Werben Jagerman Jensen's hat to his gravesite just outside of Glove World. You know, if I had a nickel for every time Smitty Werben Jagerman Jensen showed up in this video, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
He was #1!
Also, yes, Glove World is back yet again, and the Fiery Fisto Pain is a roller coaster you can ride there too. And after playing all the different variants, I'd have to say that the VR roller coaster version is the best one, but at least the rest of the ones don't induce headaches, so you know, pick your poison on these if you ever have to choose between them. I really like this world map though. It's got a lot of the iconic locations we know, like downtown Bikini Bottom and Jellyfish Fields, but there are a lot of unique settings that this game features that we haven't seen in other titles, such as the Demolition Derby arena, where you can sign up to do a point scoring minigame.
Break the target!
Yeah, basically. You can run around with a giant hammer or one of those ball things from Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest and break a bunch of material to score massive bonus points. There's also the airfield, which has a really cool skydiving minigame that I greatly enjoyed, and using the glider backpack to get around the map was debatably my favorite form of travel, rivaled only by the blue jellyfish that linger around Jellyfish Fields, which Patrick can grab onto and use to get to pretty much anywhere in the entire environment. If you're gonna use any method of travel, I definitely recommend grabbing one of these guys. They will make your life so much easier. The Bikini Bottom dump also makes an appearance, which was a surprise to me. I never would have thought we'd wind up here, but there's a giant treasure chest scavenger hunt that Plankton and Patrick go on, eventually resulting in the unlocking of a pirate ship pinball board that Patrick can get bounced around in a bunch to both get a few remaining treasure chests and also, again, score points for the high score ranking system. This sort of thing is what I really appreciate about this game. The creativity is very apparent, and there's cool rewards that you as the player get get to receive for accomplishing these tasks and goals. I haven't even mentioned it yet, but as you complete said quests and feats, you unlock costumes for Patrick to wear, which are all references to various episodes from the show. So that's a cool little incentive to go around and complete as many tasks as you can so you can get to the very end of the game with all costumes unlocked for you to enjoy. The dump isn't the only less common area though, because Bikini Bottom University also makes an appearance, which was another breath of fresh air I appreciated seeing in this game, where Patrick can go around and do a bunch of different tasks for Squidward, such as drawing and sculpting. I also love that there's this little reference you can do where you can snag Bold and Brash and throw it in the dump, rewarding you for it belonging in the trash. This game is very cheeky with that sort of thing. If you're a fan of the series, you'll get references galore here, so definitely expect to go in and receive some nostalgia pandering. While the classic era certainly seems to be alluded to the most, there are references baked in here that go beyond the first 3 seasons of the show, so there is more than just the first era of the show's history that gets attention, and you know, I respect that. As many of the different DLC packages and other games have come across in this video, it certainly feels that the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob get the most callbacks, and you know, rightfully so. They are the peak of the show and pretty much the best episodes of a cartoon ever created when it comes to straight up comedy. But you know, those later seasons also have their fans, and it's nice for people to get some acknowledgement towards some later episodes they may enjoy for a change. A couple other areas in the game include the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket, which is where you can serve customers various orders and basically play a better version of Diner Dash, where it requires more of the player to match the orders that are coming in without screwing up, although the gameplay isn't identical, so it's not a one-to-one comparison. But still, I enjoyed that this one, especially the Krusty Krab side of things, had me on my feet for a bit, as the ingredients that were being asked for could vary quite a lot. And plus there's also a reference to salads, so you know, that was cool too. Mrs. Puff's boating school is here as well, where you can drive around and compete in races across Bikini Bottom, which I must say, the first place AI vehicles are out with a vendetta against Patrick or something. I mean, these guys must have an infinite mass vehicle mod installed, because if you run into the opponents, you just get blasted away. You basically cannot collide with them because you'll end up getting knocked behind, so you have to avoid touching them while also trying to pass them, and when all of the vehicles go the same speed, the only way you're going to pull that off is by going around them, which can only really happen at certain opportune moments. I kinda wish this minigame was a bit better, because really there's no element of having the potential to interfere with the other opponents while you yourself have to avoid all sorts of obstacles like lampposts, ramps, the other boats, and fire hydrants, which can all send you off course. And beyond that, you know, there's a bunch of other miscellaneous tasks scattered throughout the entirety of the map. I could sit here and go through and like acknowledge every single one of them, but I feel like that kind of ruins the fun and enjoyment, and I definitely encourage people to go get this game and play it for themselves, because there's so much more to explore and find here than what I'm really letting on. I kind of don't want to ruin the fun and surprise that you can come across as you play the game for yourself. So I apologize that I'm not going into every single reference and every single environment, but really, get this game, give it a shot. It's a fun time. Last but not least though, I will say there are the Fry Cook games, which has already appeared in this video with the plug and play variant, but this is the grand finale of the game here. Basically, everything you do in it leads up to this final showdown between you and SpongeBob, where Plankton recruits you to once again compete against Mr. Crabstar Fry Cook in a handful of minigames that you'll ultimately win, and result in the ending celebration of the game as the credits roll by, including a reference to the dance stage that was also featured at Bikini Bottom University, where you can run around and grab a bunch of different things and basically make it rain as Patrick Star, which is, you know, kind of amusing. But yeah, that's the Patrick Star game in a nutshell. Not the longest review in the world, I know, but it's a short game to begin with, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's no story to get into, and yeah, I appreciate that this is just kind of open. It's what you make of it. The game is all in the eye of the beholder, and that's honestly refreshing. Honestly, I would say this game is the perfect length too. If I had to sink another 3 hours into it trying to get 100%, I'd probably have some criticism that the game drags on for a bit too long, but as it stands, the game is a neat little bundle that fans of the show will definitely get a kick out of, and it feels like the perfect length. I really can't complain. Not all games need to follow the $1 for every hour of gameplay rule, and I feel like this one fits that boat, you know? If you absolutely have to wait for the game to go on sale before you get it, that's fine, but honestly, I have no issue with the game as it currently stands. Even if it's not the most incredible title in the world, it's pretty good for what it was trying to be. I'd say it succeeds on that front, so good job. This is a pretty good game. And that's just about going to do it for this little follow-up addendum to my first SpongeBob Games video. That being said, hopefully this satiates those of you that wanted to hear my thoughts on some of the titles that weren't covered in that first video. I'm very well aware that as time continues to press forward, there will be more SpongeBob games that come out and get released beyond these. And heck, I mean, there's already one announced for 2025, it seems, so this may or may not be the last time I end up visiting SpongeBob's gaming catalog. I have no idea. I'm not really sure how I intend to cover these future games, seeing as I'm basically either gonna have to make separate individual videos on them, which I don't really see myself doing, or come up with some other sort of way of covering them. But hey, that's future me's problem, I guess. I'm not making any promises that I will return to SpongeBob again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Who's to say? But for now, I hope you enjoyed the video regardless, and let me know what you thought of these SpongeBob games in the comments below. I enjoyed my time with about half of these gems, and while the other half weren't all that enjoyable or impressive, and some of them absolutely mind-boggling, I'm still glad to have broadened my horizons and experienced them regardless. So hey, you know, I'll keep that glass half full mindset there. Not all video games are completely doomed in this industry, but some of them are. But with that, jokes aside, I'm gonna go ahead and find something else to play now. So until next time, Shadowstreak signing off.